Yay! And we are live. So, hello everybody. This is yet another of my interviews, as basically part of a spiritual alchemy show special, which have two different versions. One's been aired on Monday on a spiritual alchemy show on Pulse Talk Radio, and one is having the version with the images. Okay, with the video on YouTube, where you can see me with an inappropriate amount of makeup, together with Mallorie from New York, a witch, magician, occultist female, and who is, have to actually say that out loud, because last time I was talking about how I definitely should and how it would be a good idea to actually include more females in my shows and kind of give them more of a space, because I know a lot of ladies who are into occult and into magic, and not just the type of a magic that you might expect, maybe witch or Wiccan, which seems to be like where most people would imagine a female magician would be, but also ladies who are into things like ceremonial magic or black magic, actually. From my experience, one of the toughest black magicians I've met was actually females. Yes, I would actually, like, the three most toughest black magicians I met, I would all three of them were actually females. So this was a topic that I found fairly interesting, because we all know about men being interested in this topic, and in general they tend to be quite loud about it, and there seems to be like girls kind of being kind of that, not that kind of in the background. Obviously they're getting attentions because they have female reproductive organs and the tits, so they're getting more attention obviously in general, but because this is like men-filled world kind of. But in the same hand, I've noticed they're not that pushy about their abilities on the public media as the guys are. But I actually think like it's actually very interesting and seems to be changing. Like, there is definitely a long history of a female magicians, Doreen Valiente, all sorts of like different people being into magical traditions and having recognition. But it's something like I also noticed that currently I think this is something a bit more American thing than European thing. The role of feminism seems to be kind of going up. I'm seeing more of it, people mentioning it on the social media, like feminism. There seems to be more charities, more articles, more online magazines being around that topic. So I'm actually happy to kind of see that also it includes the magical movement, and this is going more on the surface. So I decided I'm going to include more females on my broadcast, and Mallorie is the first one. Or like, I've done some before, but like, she is the part of the equality program, self-imposed equality program I started. So hello, Mallorie. Nice to have you here.
Hello, Astrid, and happy Woman Crush Wednesday.
What voice that?
Woman Crush Wednesday.
Really?
Hashtag WCW. Oh, you have to check it out. Okay.
I have no idea. I'm just like, I have no idea. Like, I'm living in my like London tarot cave. I think I should go. You can see how pale I am. That's because I'm not going outside and talk to people. I'm just here doing magic, doing tarot, being like completely antisocial moth.
I think that's the way it's supposed to be, actually.
I was like so antisocial lately. But okay, so I mentioned that you are obviously into magic and spirituality, but how did you start? How a nice American girl starts with magic?
I did not actually start with magic, but I started with being obsessed with secrets. And from a very young age, I don't know, I feel like I wanted to be maybe a spy or a detective, but I was obsessed with cryptography. I was obsessed with lock picking. I had a little like detective kit that I used that had like a magnifying glass in it and invisible ink, and a recording device, which got me into trouble a couple of times. But I was just really, really profoundly driven to find something that wasn't obvious, to find something that other people were missing. And I had this just kind of inkling that there was always something else out there, and someone who was clever and someone who was paying attention would be able to catch on to it. And so I think that that led me to magic, in part because it's really that same drive, you know, the drive towards magic is the drive towards literally what is hidden, the actual literal occulted body of knowledge. But also just because I started to notice that as I got better and better at observing people, most of them were just profoundly boring. And when you're obsessed with secrets, you want it's because you want something interesting, not because you want to find out that people are really as boring as they seem on the outside. And so I don't really know what exactly got me started on the path that I was on, but I do remember from a very young age starting to find spells written down on pieces of paper, some of them written out in you know, handwriting, some of them which had been printed and maybe torn out of a book. And so I started to find them and to collect them and create my own little grimoire of what was probably just, you know, someone's poetry or fantasy. I don't have any of them left at this point, unfortunately. I'm sure my parents threw them out, thinking that I was weird.
That's such a shame.
But yeah, it was, you know, it was a strange process of becoming aware that you could actually buy books of spells still, that they weren't all fictional at this point, but that you could go and you know, go to a Borders, no longer around. You can't go to a Borders anymore. But you could go to a Barnes & Noble or any other bookstore and you know, find books of magic still in print. I'm not really sure how that clicked for me, but when it did, it was you know, revolutionary. And that was, I guess, kind of how I got started. Sorry, was first looking for hidden things and eventually realizing that there were hidden things that were inherently magical.
That's so beautiful. But actually, you know what? It made me realize I had the same kit. I also had the detective kit.
Oh, did you read Harriet the Spy growing up?
I have.
Or did you see the movie?
We didn't have that in Czech.
Oh.
But I have like a similar version of the kit you've been talking about, just because I bit out the recording device. And actually, it made me realize when I was a teenager, I was fairly obsessed with Agatha Christie's books. And because I was always reading the book and I was trying to read the people's minds so I know who's the murderer. And I've read like 40 of them. I was 14, 15. And it actually made me think that basically that was one of the basic base stone for me becoming psychic later on and be able to read people. And actually, if I'm thinking about it now, it was the same feeling. I was just reading a non-existing character. So definitely this idea of starting with something hidden, it's very interesting. And you collected a spell, but did you actually were you self-taught, or actually were you looking up maybe for other people or groups? And like most of, like not most, but I'd say loads of people are starting as you know, I was a teenage witch. You know, were you teenage witch, or was it just something more in?
Was I a teenage witch? That's a good question. I don't really think so. I really wanted to be at the time. And you know, I discovered a lot of the same books that, you know, a lot of other people discovered at that age. Books actually called literally Teen Witch or How to Be a Teen Witch or the Teen Witch's Book of Spells. But I wasn't really practicing. I was just kind of reading them the same way that you would read fiction. And it wasn't until a couple years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, I had a traumatic experience and I almost died. And I don't really want to go into the nature of that on the radio because this is the first time that a lot of people are probably going to meet me, and I don't want that kind of trauma to define who I am. But after that, everything just took a turn for the weird. My whole life really turned upside down after that. And I started meeting real witches and real magicians, and went from being a kind of wannabe solitary practitioner to someone who was surrounded by the most incredible psychic people, diviners, operative sorcerers, and healers also. And so all of the formal training that I've had and the group work that I've done has been as an adult.
So, like that's actually quite interesting. Again, I've heard that quite a few times that somebody got very strong. Somebody was, let's say, psychic or very prone to magical energies as a kid. Then they kind of shut it down during the teenage age, possibly like family conditioning work, or just like having a different problems as a teenager, the focus being somewhere else. And then in the early adulthood, usually it's around early 20s, like as the person is going usually somewhere outside of the puberty, then somehow something happens and they kind of are pushed literally to go back to that, because somehow it's their path and somehow it's just not something they should abandon. It seems like the divinity is always like pushing the right people who have the right talents, like somewhere back on the way. And if you try to struggle with it, it's just kind of like pushes you back, because it just wants you to do that.
Yeah, I could totally see that being the case. I definitely grew up with kind of latent issues with spirit intrusion, and with also hypersensitivity to a certain degree. I was hypersensitive to touch and to color and to sound, and I really struggled with the sensorium. I really struggled having a body again, and being human. But I don't think that I ever learned how to wield that as a power, and as something which gives me strength and gives me life until coming very close to death.
I've noticed, but again, that's something that's from my system practice. That's like my idea, that basically the ability of getting physical sensations, if you are doing magic, I've noticed that it from in my system, it has very strong effect on the actual results. I've noticed the stronger the physical sensations as a reaction on your thought, magic, and your will, the better the results. Because for me, that was the link between your will and the physical world is we are getting physical. So that was, let's say, that's one of the things that I was struggling. I was not getting that many physical sensations. Like the energy in the room would change, but I was not getting physical sensations. So that something I'm working on developing, because I've noticed if I'm having more of them, the magic gets stronger. So it seems like you have like a great, talents, great baseline to kind of use for magic. So what is your favorite school? What's your favorite direction? Are you ceremonial,
Oh
witchy?
no,
What do you
I'm
like?
not ceremonial. No. I've always been interested in herbalism and astrology, and those do continue to guide me to a certain extent. In terms of the work that I do with, you might say, divinity or with spirits, a lot of it is very strongly influenced by my Italian heritage. And certainly in working with the various Madonne and the Santi, that has opened me up to a world of experiences that I never really thought possible, while at the same time shedding a new light on my family and on where I came from. And particularly, we live in a very Italian-American section of New York. And so I really feel connected to the neighborhood and to the recent history of the land when I'm able to commune with it the way that the people who were holding religious processions in the streets and who are still holding often religious processions in the streets at several points in the year were relating to it. So there's that kind of both cultural and necromantic aspect of it, where you are aligning yourself with the seasonal festivals, even as they're being handed down to you by a kind of folk Catholicism as opposed to, outright pagan expressions.
I've noticed like folk or Catholicism, but Christianity in UK, let's say it's very strong in the which traditions. I would say in general that's quite European thing, but I know also African. But I've noticed like in Europe, as far as I know, that was quite strong. Like let's say with me, it was the fun is that I'm coming from the most atheistic country in the whole world. Czech Republic is the most atheistic country. So actually, that actually got in like you don't have any roots in spirituality because everybody's atheist, nobody believes in anything, and everybody is depressed and in most cases alcoholic. So in that sense, I got like a fresh sleeve in terms of roots, which kind of like I think open up way to kind of a exploration. But I've noticed that loads of people actually from US I talk to been very much talking about their roots and connection to ancestors and connection to the roots. For me, it actually sounds of a sort of like a bit of American specialty, because as far as I know, like in UK, because yeah, we've been mentioning about like the recent Facebook fuss about what's the difference between UK and US traditions, and I kind of like did the dirt throwing over the pond. I've noticed on some social medias, but I must admit from what I've seen, yes, I would say there is a certain differences, but in this sense, I am on the side of the American pool. Um, I
That's
am.
interesting.
I am
Well,
because I'm in London. I know what I'm talking about. I
well,
know.
one thing that I do find very interesting that my partner and I talk a lot about is the ways in which immigrant groups are often more they conserve more of a culture than perhaps the region that they came from will. And so you see that a lot linguistically, where the French, which is spoken in Quebec, is closer to the French from like the 17th century or whenever than the French which is spoken in France today. And certainly in Brooklyn and in Manhattan right now, we have dialects of Neapolitan and Sicilian which are no longer spoken in Naples and in Sicily. So there is definitely, I think, a kind of inherent reflection that happens when you are a recent immigrant, or you know, your parents were immigrants, your grandparents were immigrants, where you do become curious about what was lost as part of that transition. And personally, I believe that that becomes compounded as that first generation passes away and the second generation passes away, because then you have these kind of ancestral spirits who are torn, kind of, they're between worlds. They made that cross, you know, they made that their way across the water, and are resting in land which may seem foreign to them. It's not the land that they were born on. And for those of us who are in that youngest generation, who have not yet had our own children, I think we tend to get visited by the first generation immigrants. And I think that they can show up in kind of unusual ways at times, and really be pushing us towards self-discovery and towards discovery of things which may have been forgotten, or things which were, you know, they were ashamed of in their own lifetimes. The processes of assimilation that they went through and that their children went through, those kind of come back to haunt us, so to speak.
That's
and
very interesting.
yeah, it's something that I think about a lot, certainly, and seeing the way that my grandparents and my parents are, in many ways, either ashamed or afraid of their own heritage.
That's so interesting. So you basically your background is it's all Italians.
It's mostly Italian, and we grew up considering ourselves culturally Italian because there's a lot of weird parallelism on both sides of my family, and one aspect of that is both of my grandmothers were disowned by their parents for marrying Italian men, which my Nana is actually half Italian. Her father was Italian, so you know, that was a bit hypocritical of him. But they suffered through all of this hardship and became, very much a part of the community. So um, we had a lot more of that cultural influence growing up than we did of any of the other groups of immigrants who contributed to my gene pool.
Hmm. I've noticed that basically the magic communities or the connections I'm getting from people from US, especially New York, seems to be to me actually very interesting. Like there's loads of things going on that people exploring, different cultural backgrounds, different cultural roots, but as you said, like also realizing and working with your own roots. Um, from my experience, London and UK isn't anything like that. So as I said, I am definitely on the side of the New Yorkers, as this currently New York and US being like the capital of a magic. I'm going to be terrible, but I'm going to say that because I'm terrible. That from my experience, then the London and UK magic in general, it's people in their 50s, 60s, 70s uh, sitting over a beer and talking how things were great in 70s and wondering why they're not attracting younger audience. So that was like my experience from what's kind of going on. But there are a few people who are like pushing it forward, but it's not like a general tendencies of the community. It's more like a few beacons lost in the woods, pushing their own ideas. Hopefully that will trigger something, but trigger something different. But also, yeah, there is like undercurrent in London, which is more, I guess, going in opposition to this. But that's more like bunch of kinky people liking the idea of occult, really, and just like using it in magazines. I've seen there's actually one center in the most hipsterish part of London that is basically like using this hip like witchy symbols, but they just put it in triangles and they put it in a like cuff.
Well,
Yeah,
we have that too in New York.
hipster magic.
There's definitely, there's definitely people who have different goals when they get into this sort of thing, and some people are satisfied with that level of just visual appeal, and I'm not going to hate on that. It's not my thing. It will never be my thing, and it will never be able to satisfy what I'm looking for. But I am really, really, I feel blessed to be in New York at this time and to be surrounded by the people that I am surrounded by, because, there is so much going on, and, I've met such incredible people here. And I never wanted to move to New York. I always thought that was, this silly idealistic thing that people do in their 20s. And I was cynical from a very young age. But I moved to New York because of the pressing economic opportunity. Like I'm sure a lot of young people now, we're all kind of driven into urban areas by, by the fact that that's where the jobs are, if there are any. So that was what brought me to New York. It wasn't ever my dream to be here. And I'm really glad that that I could be so shamelessly bribed.
That's so cute. It's just like all these people like New York, my dream, and like not me. I know, I love it. Like, but definitely there is idealism whenever like early 20s idealism brought me to London.
Really? Oh, you caught the bug then. Oh, that's good for you though.
Now getting to my 30s, losing that enthusiasm, but but that's actually quite interesting. You actually mentioned that you are into herbalism, but I'm thinking, okay, New York herbs. Where you're getting your herbs in New York, I guess I know there are a few parks in London when I know certain people are going to pick up things like just because I forgot the name. The poisonous belladonna. Belladonna. That's some like actually growing in actual public park. But how were you getting like your herbs? Is there like shops or you're growing something yourself? How do you sort it out in your like urban area?
Yeah, it's a bit of everything. I do work with you know, a lot of dried, cut, and sifted herbs, which, you know, I'll order online or go to the local herb shop. And so I work with dried herbs in that way. And then I also have a plot at a community garden, where I grow a lot of the herbs that I prefer to use fresh, whether that's in magic or in cooking. Basil, obviously, Italian girl, like lots of oregano. Shameless, shameless. As far as wild crafting goes, I don't get to do that as often as I would like to, but you know, your options for wild crafting in an urban environment like this are either, you know, pull it up out of the side of the road and risk the heavy metal, you know, poisoning, or try to go into the deepest part of Central Park, or take the Metro North train up to, you know, the Woodstock area, or you know, somewhere a couple hours outside of the city. And there is, you know, plenty of land to do wild crafting there. There are also a lot of herbal teachers north of the city. Susan Weed, for example, her farm is I think in Saugerties, which is near Woodstock. So there are definitely options for people who are interested in herbalism, but who are living in New York. But still, the majority of the work that I do is with herbs that I purchase.
So, and did you notice, like, do you think that maybe the idea of, I'm just guessing, the idea of urban environment, do you think it's more like pushing people towards herbalism because it's not something that is available, you know, maybe they're missing nature, then let's say they would more if it would be widely available around. So do you think it's like, do you think it's actually somehow having the effect, like maybe people in the cities are more into that or less into that than somebody from who actually have like massive forest just behind their house?
That's an interesting question. Having never had the privilege of living in a more rural area, I can't really speak to how common the interest is there. But what I will say is that for people who study herbalism in a holistic sense, one of the first things that you learn is that often the cures that we need are the ones that are growing with us, and that nature has a way of bringing that balance into play. And in urban areas, what are the herbs that you see growing wild? It's always weeds. And weeds are strong. They will push out of the concrete. They will mess with your roads. They will mess with your sidewalks. They will mess with all of this urban infrastructure if, you know, if they have the opportunity to. But one of the herbs that I've seen growing absolutely rampantly in Brooklyn in particular is mugwort, which of course is renowned as a spiritual teacher, as an herb for lucid dreaming and for trance induction. It's, you know, an herb which can be imbibed safely. It's an herb which can be used to fumigate a space, and just generally something which is very powerful. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that we have mugwort really taking over the city at the same time that we have people who are looking for spiritual alternatives to a life which would otherwise be ruled by, you know, commercialism.
That's so great. That's so amazing. Mugwort is a great one. It's like it can get even hallucinogenic, right?
For some people, I've worked with people who have had very very intense experiences with mugwort. I haven't yet had you know, visual perception or anything like that, but I've talked to people who have had actual kind of visual hallucinations while drinking the tea. I've also talked to people who feel the same way that they do when they're smoking another herb. Wait, can we say marijuana on the air? Can we just say that? Are we?
Yeah, of course we can. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like don't worry. Like my listeners aren't anal fluff balls. I think they're used to my style. Like, if they would be fluff balls, they would drop listening to me a long time ago. So don't worry.
That's great. I'm glad. So I've talked to people who feel, you know, very much the same way that they feel when they smoke marijuana, when they drink mugwort tea. I don't have either of those experiences. I do definitely have intense dreams when I'm working with mugwort, and I do find that my perception is altered, but you know, not to the point where I would substitute it for anything else.
That's one of the things I've really wanted to do the microwave tea, but not because of the hallucination, but it says it's enhancing psychic abilities, and I was thinking that would be such a great thing to drink before I go to sleep. But then I read on the internet all of the like, oh my God, hallucination and like
Oh
jumping
gosh.
out of the window stuff. I was like, I live in the first floor, but still, that would hurt. So actually, like, so how actually. Just give people ideas. So basically, you just got a dry mugwort, and how much you put like in a cup, like 1 teaspoon, and then you have to get the herb out, or you can actually drink it with the herb.
Yeah, I think most people would prefer to strain out the herbal matter just because it can be a little annoying. But you can definitely leave it in if you're interested in tasseomancy, for example. If you want to do a teacup reading afterwards, or a tea leaf reading rather. And then, you steep it the same way that you would steep regular, herbal tea, maybe 10 minutes under boiling water. Some people prefer to keep some kind of lid on top of the cup to keep all of the essence of the herb in there. And, then just make sure that it cools down a little bit before you start sipping it. But yeah, that's one of the great things about working with herbs is it is that simple. It is just a matter of putting some dried herb into a teacup, and then that can be enough to establish a kind of relationship with the plant spirit.
Let's say, what's the herbs that you like to have as a tea? What's your favorites? What would you recommend to somebody who's just not, let's say, that much into herbalism and just like listening to it and just like thinking, nice dreams and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Which ones you would recommend except for mugwort?
Well, I personally love nettles, and I get so much of a benefit out of drinking a nettle infusion. I think a lot of people have a very similar experience. And when you talk to herbalists who specialize in kind of medicinal herbalism and herbalism, which is very focused on healing the body, I tend to do a little bit of both, healing the body and also strengthening the whatever magical or ritual actions I'm working through that day. But nettles is always a favorite because it will just, bring so much energy back into your life. And for women in particular, it's very high in iron. So it's a great way to get the iron, particularly during the time of the month when our iron levels tend to plummet. Also a very strong spiritual herb as well. It has a lot of complex mysteries to it. The stinging aspect of it, the fact that if you touch it, the live plant, you get this kind of stung sensation, very clearly marks it as a martial herb. So it's an herb.
Oh, true. It fights back.
Yes. Yeah, it does fight back. I've heard stories from people who have developed relationships with the plant where they can touch it and they won't be stung. And I've also heard that for some people, it's a matter of learning the exact right amount of pressure to grab it with. So you're grabbing it and you're not violating the plant, but at the same time, you're not shy about the fact that you're harvesting it. I haven't had that experience yet. I just get stung and it hurts like hell. But maybe, over time working with the plant spirit, I'll get to the point where I'm able to harvest it barehanded, but
like
not yet.
In Czech Republic, it's like so much of it during the summer. It's just like the Czech nature is by nature quite violent. It has like quite violent flowers like this one. So nettles everywhere during the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Like massive, like long ones and like couple meters high. So can you actually find something like that in New York, or you have to get it or buy it somewhere else?
Nettle, because I make it into infusions, I usually get it dried. You want to infuse dried plants usually. So I get most of my herbs from mountainroseherbs.com. In case anyone's curious, I have faith in their sustainable harvesting practices, and they're not paying me to say that. But if anybody wants to start down this path, they're a great resource. And if I can actually, plug my own course for a moment here, if you're interested particularly in herbs for, increased psychic ability or for aiding a divinatory practice, check out roadsideomens.vhx.com, where I have an ongoing course there where you'll learn how to make a lot of the things that we've just been talking about on the air, and where you'll learn about even more lovely herbal allies who can help you deepen whatever your practice is, whether that's reading cards or trance induction or geomancy. I've really strived to make it applicable to any kind of practice with divination.
Yay, please do. Like, if you are watching this on YouTube, look at the description section under this video. I'm going to put the link there. If you are listening this on the radio, then you will find this link on the Facebook page of the show, spiritualalchemy.com, or you can find it on YouTube. Or if you are looking at this from watching this from an archive on a SoundCloud, again, look for the description box anywhere around this sound or this video. Somewhere you will find the links.
Look for the hidden things. Get out your magnifying glass. Get out your detective kit.
Use your intuition. Ask your intuition. Where is the link? Where is the link? Can you feel it on the right? Can you feel it on the left? Can you feel it under this video or under this link? You will find it. I'm having deep faith in people's psychic abilities to find the links. So you're doing. I know you're doing the herbal courses, which is great. But you mentioned like using it together with the various system and divinatory systems too. That's actually great. That's actually true. Like all different systems, even the ones that kind of seems to be developing independently, sooner or later they're somehow using some sort of a flower, some sort of like a greenery for their purposes, beginning from Aztecs all the way to Egypt, all the way to basically everybody, Romans. We're kind of like getting into the moment when they're kind of using it. Like, are you seeing like are there any herbs that basically, let's say, almost everybody is using? Is there some, like, what would you say is like the world's most popular magical herb?
Oh gosh, I don't know. It depends on what their training is in and what they're trying to accomplish. I think mugwort is definitely the first one that everybody thinks of, maybe because they think it's going to get them high. And I would also say dandelion is overlooked by some as a magical herb, but for me is extraordinarily powerful. The root in particular, when you look at the structure of the plant, you've got the root, which is, it's like a hand reaching into the dark. It is the most ancestral part of the plant. It's the part of the plant where when the rest of it has all died away, the life energy of the plant goes down into that root so that it can sprout again. And thus it's related to those mysteries of birth and life and death and rebirth. It's a very Saturnine component to the plant, and related very much to the underworld. It lives under the ground and thus is associated with the underworld, and with ancestral work. So for those of you who are looking for maybe a necromantic ally, or an ally in works of divination that rely on the ancestors or the shades of the dead, or who are looking to make contact with departed spirits, the whole dandelion plant is a phenomenal ally, but the root in particular is worth looking into and worth working with.
That's so interesting. There was actually something that for you reminded me of. I know there is one herb that girls that are having hormonal anticonception should not drink.
St. John's wort, if you're on birth control, avoid St. John's wort. It's often prescribed as a antidepressant, but definitely with any herb, you will want to, before ingesting it, look up what the contraindications are and whether you should discontinue use of prescription drugs. In particular, a lot of herbs like mugwort, for example, if you're pregnant or nursing, you definitely should not be drinking mugwort tea. It's worth knowing what you're getting into before you start eating anything. But there are ways to commune with herbs without ingesting them.
Please don't make your child accidentally high.
Right, or accidentally provoke your period when you don't want to.
Oopsie. Yeah, like that's something I noticed. Like lots of people actually, they underestimate herbs. They're thinking like, just sort of like blah blah blah. It's not going to do anything. But from my experience, when I was having like herbs, they've been in many cases stronger than the actual medication I received from a doctor. I've seen like somebody say, oh, just a flower, blah blah blah, not important. But actually, I remember like if I was sick and I was having like a strong mint tea, and I can like felt like when I got it in my body how like the whole body was reacting to it. So I think actually loads of people underestimate like traditional herbalism and see that as definitely as like, oh, it's not as strong as the pills. But from my experience, it was stronger in many cases. Like the body was literally reacting strongly to just a cup of tea, like like sweating, or your heartbeat is racing, or just like really really strong reactions like I wouldn't have, let's say, with paracetamol or anything like that. Let's say which herbs you think are great. Let's say lots of people are really stressed, so what do you think, like what's like the good for stress release herbs?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Personally, I think for stress, the best antidote is putting less pressure on yourself. And so sometimes maybe putting pressure on yourself to say, go out and buy some weird herbs that you've never heard of, and you don't know how to get them, and you don't know how to prepare them, that can actually be kind of counterproductive. So while there are certainly a lot of herbal allies that people will turn to and to help them manage their stress levels, I've used kava in the past, which can be very calming, and I believe catnip as well is also a mild sedative. The best thing that you can do sometimes for stress is to actually cut things out of your life. And to find more time for stillness, and be a little bit easier on yourself. I hope that that's helpful.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, logic. That's usually like general common logic. Like if you're stressed, don't stress yourself out. If you are,
Susan Weed has an incredible essay on 7 types of medicine, which are ranked kind of from the most mild to the most, I guess, invasive or extreme. And so it starts with just stillness. And then she starts to gradually introduce, herbal medicines, which are just kind of nourishing or tonifying, and then starts to classify herbal medicines, which are a little bit more active, a little bit more invasive. So we can definitely put the link to that one in the show notes, because I would classify it as a must read for anybody who's interested particularly in medicinal herbalism.
That's actually something that you just said that I realized that's actually, again, something that not many people realize, that herbs actually can be that strong. They are basically, as a medicine, fairly invasive. Like it's just like a pretty flower, but it actually can be that strong.
Belladonna is a beautiful flower. Still gonna kill you. Yeah. If you're interested in medicinal herbalism, often the best way is actually to book a consultation with a practitioner who has years of experience. And I think you could also say the same of really any of the healing arts, and I include divination in that. Our magical culture is a DIY culture, which I think is beautiful. But what's also really important is, being able to see what the art looks like when it's practiced by somebody who's been doing it for years before you start to get your toes wet.
Definitely. I think with the herbalism, I would everybody who's listening would strongly recommend to actually do that first as we kind of are going around it. Some of the herbs can amazingly help you, but they can also make your hormonal contraception make not working, and also poison you if it's belladonna. So there is like that's things you definitely want to explore before you want to start to drink liters and liters of saying monk birth, then finding yourself pregnant later on. So that's, that's actually kind of bridged to something I wanted to talk about, and that is you said about the stress and stuff like that, and people working and stuff like that. That actually makes me like, again, bridging to what I was wanted to talk about, and that is, okay, you do a lot of magical practice, you're into occultism, herbs, and magic, and all very interest you, and some of those things actually are quite time demanding. Like some of the rituals just you said you're in your astrology, so let's say it's occasionally time sensitive rituals, full moons, no ones, and obviously that's if you're practicing or if you're learning, if you're interested in this type of things, it usually takes some brain space, some time, and obviously that naturally becomes a part of your life. But then you have this other life, loads of people who have an actual, I'm calling it always an actual job. I'm calling myself self-unemployed, but like people have an actual job. So if if you have like an actual adult job, then naturally, okay, you're meeting. Obviously, that takes some time to 40 hours a week, but also you are talking to people in the job, and what you've been doing during the weekend. I'm like, just like doing some sort of like full moon rituals and stuff like that. What to tell them? Like, occasionally, like I'm sorry, people are going to hate me for saying that, but I'm calling it muggles. Occasionally making it like hard to socialize with the people who might, who see occult through the eyes of Hollywood as something that they say, like if they say, oh, I'm a witch, they immediately see Blair Witch type of a thing. So it takes a bit part, like obviously it takes chunk of your life. So how you are coping with actually explaining this chunk of a people, let's say, to people from non-magical environments, and how you're balancing it out with your job?
That's an excellent question, and I think it's our community tends to focus more on people who are doing this full time, and who are maybe going on podcasts or speaking publicly in order to promote their businesses, and less on practitioners who are doing it for themselves and for their families and for their friends and their communities. And so I'm really happy to represent as best I can that latter group of people who have completely unrelated day jobs, and whose practice is for building health, and for building community. Not, of course, that I would ever judge someone for turning their magical practice into a magical career. I think that that's wonderful. But I think that in any of these conversations that we have together as a community, there needs to be diverse voices. And personally, I see the balance between magic and career as one which is really important to learn how to strike, at least at some point in your life. And you asked in particular about how do I explain what it is that I do on the weekend to the people that I work with. But for me, the description of what it is that I do is never about building an identity for myself. It's never about trying to craft an image of, a witch or a black magician or an artist. It's about finding some kind of common ground so that I can connect to my coworkers, who are people who I spend, 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week with. And those relationships are important to me. And so being able to find that common ground with each individual means, maybe over or under emphasizing certain parts of my practice. One of the most rewarding parts of my office job has been being able to find people who are actually genuinely interested in, say, astrology or herbalism, who are interested in connecting with me over that, and who maybe want to learn a little bit more about that, who want to come over for dinner and talk about it. And being able to point them in the right direction is, enormously satisfying. And then there are other people who, that's just not the point of my life that I'm going to connect with them on. And there are maybe other things that we'll be able to talk about, like, our favorite TV shows, or, sometimes even just the weather. But yeah, I would say that when you are in a position where your public life and your private life don't match up 100%, that's actually quite normal. And not everything that you do magically or spiritually is something that you need to be broadcasting all the time.
I know that yeah, I'm so happy you brought it up, because I know, and I absolutely encourage, and I think it's a great idea that, magical community should be absolutely diverse. And I know loads of people who are having like a non-magic related day job. My own main job is a tarot card reader, which is basically like partially related, partially unrelated, but basically it's like magical version of a psychotherapist in a sense. And what I love what you said, because I used to work, I used to have like a day job for years, and I had the same thing, like, okay, question, what have you been done during the weekend? And I'm like, can I say I was running around cemeteries in the middle of the night with a bone, with a bag full of human bones? No, 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 no. Okay, I am into crystals, so I kind of like tone it down. That's like, I'm looking at the person, as you said, exactly, putting more emphasis on the certain parts of the practice, while
Right.
putting less emphasis on the other parts of the practice, including running around the cemetery in the middle of the night. So
Yeah.
I would like, yeah, I'm working with crystals. That's sometimes that I've noticed that, like, that's fairly safe ground in most cases. Crystals, herbs, that's okay. That's like fairly safe ground. But I actually noticed that if I actually do that, I was surprised how many people were actually interested in even the parts I was trying on a purpose not to put emphasis on. So, and then actually it gave me amazing lessons. Like, do not judge a book by the cover. I remember being in a job, and there was this like English rose type of a girl, look completely innocent and fragile and so like cute and proper. And then we started to talk, and she started to be very interested, and she turned out to be the most kinky person I've ever met. And so one thing I noticed also in the working environment, I would be actually interested if you have a similar experience, was that when I kind of hinted that I'm interested in this type of things, loads of people told me they've seen a ghost. Because
yeah.
I was the person like kind of like into this stuff, and they didn't feel judged. Then I actually realized, oh my God, like I would say 1 in 5 people seen a ghost.
I think it's higher than that. I think it's much higher than that.
Right?
I've had the same experience where when people gauge that you are safe to talk about certain elements of their life too, they will just completely open up about, supernatural experiences, ghosts, aliens, whatever it is that they've gone through. I always do my best to I guess, listen thoughtfully and maybe give them, if they're looking for advice, give them advice. If they're looking to just have another person who doesn't seem crazy on the surface, tell them, yeah, that sounds completely normal and you're fine, and you shouldn't be concerned about it, then I'll do that. But yeah, what's fascinating to me about that is people who have these really earth-shattering experiences and never follow up on them. Because for me, you know, with that drive towards secret knowledge, if I were to see a ghost the same way that someone else did when I was 5 years old, I would have become a paranormal investigator. I would have, you know, I would have bought the little, what do you call the detecting thing that tells you when there's been a ghost in a room?
Is it something like Ghostbuster used to have?
It's, yeah, like EMP reader. I don't know. I don't know. One of your readers is really ashamed of me right now, or one of your listeners is really ashamed of me right now. I'm not really up on my paranormal investigation game, but yeah, so the idea of, you know, having that type of experience and then just sort of going back to normal life, to me is just like, wow, I can't believe you can do that. But, you know, different people have different callings, and it's also, you know, every individual, I think, has points in their life where they're more open to these things, and points in their life where they start to close off for whatever reason, whether that's familial conditioning, or whether that's the pressure that they have at work, or whether that's just that they're focused on something which is very concrete. You know, they're very focused on their career in that moment, or they're very focused on, you know, raising their kid at that moment. So different people will, you know, have spiritual awakenings at different points in their life, and yeah, it changes by the day for some people. That's fine.
Absolutely. I've noticed like actually this whole spirituality and seeing ghosts, like it seems to be really like a bubbling thing on under the surface, even like with the
Mm.
like the non-magical masses. It seems like so many people told me they've seen a ghost, but then like even like people who you would never expect, like manager of a chocolate shop told me, oh my God, she got like really traumatizing experience with a ghost when she was
Mm.
17, like very strong like shadow scene, like was actually attacking her. Um, but I think
Mm.
like it seems like everybody's having experience with a ghost, but they're not saying it to anybody because they will think the other people would judge them as a crazy, while actually almost everybody having that experience. So it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's like
it's bizarre.
we have like a closeted supernatural experiences, but it's way more common than people would assume. They're thinking like, oh my God, this is like super serious manager in my job, and he got the experience like seeing ghosts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think like it seems like the spirituality and this connection with the roots and ancestors, it's bubbling on the surface. It's hidden. It's just
Mm.
it's waiting, waiting for its time to go back and shine.
Yeah.
Um, and and as I said, exactly, I get the same experience. Like if you are a magical person in a day job, you become the safe person to talk to about those things.
Hmm.
So I would say I get exactly the same experience. On one hand, with some people, it actually drew us apart because they've been thinking like, "Oh my God, crystals and stuff." That's no. But on the same person, for the certain part of the community, I can become closer to them because I become the safe person to talk about those things they can't talk to anybody else about. So I've noticed
Hmm.
have this like, okay, two axe with the two blades can cut both ways,
Right. Yeah.
in a sense. But have you actually become some sort of like a teacher to some of your coworkers? Is there like somebody who's like, oh my God, show me more about this? Was like somebody you can kind of become guru to?
No, no, not at all. When I teach, it's usually more of like a kind of peer-to-peer thing. So, you know, I've taught a couple of live classes, both solo and with my fiance, and you know, we don't take long-term students, we don't take apprentices or anything. We like to put together interesting and accessible material, and then, you know, focus on making sure that people have a good time, they learn a thing or two, and they have the resources that they need at the end of the class to follow up on anything that really interested them.
um, there's actually just mentioned one thing, and there's one other thing that the two of us have in common, and that is something that nobody's really talking about. But I've never seen any posts about it or And actually, that is how it is to actually dating somebody who's into magic while being in the magic yourself. Like you have many different like stories and stuff like how is it, let's say, if two policemen is dating together, or lots of jokes if two doctors are dating together. It's like they're like, you know, talking about surgeries over a dinner. But I think I've noticed like with the magic, this is taking very interesting spin, at least from my experience, than actually with the both from the couple are actually into spirituality and into magic. I've noticed like because people, this is something that I've noticed, somehow magic attracts quite heated discussions.
Really? Huh.
From my experience.
I had never experienced that before.
So actually, it's just like, I would say we are not arguing that often about certain things, but it happened, I think, once with the kind of like when we like disagree on certain like point of perspective on magic, and that was like, it's like obviously that would conversation that if we wouldn't be in the same thing, that wouldn't happen. It was it was actually very, 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 very heated. So how the conversation with two of you works, like, it's like, are you cooperating? Or is it like a bit challenging each other? It's like, who is that? Or is it like enhancing each other? How would you say is your dynamics?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I think neither of us is a very martial individual. So we're not the type of couple who like, fights all the time and that's their way of flirting. And we do share so many of our core values, which makes it easy to reach a point of understanding with one another. And we also study in several of the same systems. So we have that going for us. I think also when you're in a relationship with someone, it's different when you move in together. And then all of a sudden, it's not just about you getting along. It's about your alters getting along. And it's about learning how to share and divide space and give each other space. And especially in New York, where, you're paying $2,000 for a 300 square foot studio apartment, it can be challenging because space is at such a premium and you are inhabiting such, a small living area. But I would say that for people who are in, very serious long-term relationships, one of the most beautiful and satisfying things that I've gone through so far with my partner is the merging of our ancestral altars. And getting to the point where, when we honor our dead, we honor them together. And leading up to that was several experiences of becoming aware of the fact that, his ancestors had my back, my ancestors had his back, and also starting to understand each other's, the issues that we've inherited, and the ways in which we can help each other to address those in our lifetimes.
No, it's just like I just melted under the table, like, like exploring your partner's ancestors. That's like the most romantic thing you can ever do. Just like how closer even you can get. It's just like, this is actually, even for me, it feels even like closer than the actual sexual intercourse. Like actually, like, okay, that's cool, but that's two of you merging, but actually like merging with the whole bloodline. That means it's like, and actually like exploring it, that's actually even closer to me. It seems like even like more intimate type of connection.
Well, when you think about it, that connection comes from, a bunch of other people's intercourse. Like that's what it is, really. That's what's binding us all together.
So the line down the line.
Yeah.
True.
But ancestral work is beautiful and rewarding, and it's one of the few things that I think everybody should look into and to explore, because while I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say that everybody's going to have a good time and everybody's ancestors are super sweet and they just have your back all the time, no, many people have very complicated relationships with their ancestors, and you know, even with their, you know, immediate birth family. But the exploration of that space will almost always help whatever it is that you've got going on. And if you have troublesome ancestors, you probably already know it, because it's probably already expressing itself somehow in your life in some way.
So let's say how this can work if somebody's exploring your partner's ancestors. Like, is there a chance that you can actually not get along with them? It's like you're not getting with your ancestor in-laws, in-law line, or is it more? Do you think like some more tendencies to, because it's ancestors, to, because that's the same something I'm always like thinking, but again, there's something in my head that when it's ancestors ghosts, they're kind of like always nicer than they've been when they've been alive, so they are able to digest things they otherwise wouldn't. So I have no idea why has this idea of ancestors always being like the nice, nice spirits. But what is your take on that? Do you think ancestors are always nice and always like the partner?
Well, I think everybody's experience of working with their ancestral line is going to be different. And the things that emerge, which emerge, you know, through dream or through waking spirit contact, will help to inform that. Most of the people that I know who have done deep ancestral work have found that while it may become, if you're experiencing problems, they may become more acute when you start to address it. It rarely spirals out of control, if that makes any sense. Like there are few instances where it's like provoking a mad dog and you just regret doing it. If there are things that come up, they usually come up in the beginning, and through continued work with the ancestral line, there's some resolution there, which leads to healing not only for you, but for people in your family who are still alive. I personally am of the belief that each one of us does have mighty dead in our lines, and that when we reach backwards, they reach forward. And so all of those other generations, which may be messed up, which maybe didn't receive proper funereal rites, which maybe had issues or were murdered or had some kind of huge distress, which would cause them to act restlessly, or what have you, can be brought kind of in line by the combined force of the living practitioner, the flowering head of the line, and then the root, which is sending the life force, the green force, through the entirety of the organism.
Oh, that's such, you describe it so precisely. Like that's exactly how it is. And thank you for putting it in such like great words. Really, it's like such, because this is very complex problem. This whole like idea of actually like the how the ancestors work behind you. They are dead, but are not completely dead, and you're like receiving power through them to you. Wow. Thank you. I think like loads of people are like now, maybe I should start working with ancestors if they haven't done it already. But let's say with ancestor work, how would you recommend? Because not everybody, let's say, know their roots. Loads of people, let's say, again, that's just in my case, they don't know one side of their family. Like maybe father, mother, it's complete unknown, or basically they don't know anything about their family behind their grandmothers. What would you recommend to, you know, what to do for those people who just don't know like big chunks of their family lines?
I think when you put the intention out there, you will probably be given something to focus on, and maybe that's, you'll think of a map. You want to get a map of the general area where you know your family is from, or maybe that's you realize that your great grandmother, you have her a picture of her, or you know, you have your great grandfather's wedding ring, or something like that, some kind of element to focus on, and then that will help to unlock elements of the practice, I think. And again, dreaming is very important. In doing so, it will reveal a lot about what it is that will help your ancestors with the dead that are. And can you still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
See you. Yeah, I think.
All right, I lost you for a second there.
No, we are back live.
Okay, great. I was just saying that in working with your own personal dead, your body is your most important tool, and how it feels in your body, and your gut reaction, often literally your gut reaction, is what's going to lead you in the right direction. So beyond that, I think, a candle and a glass of water is often a great starting point, but really pay attention to how that makes you feel. Does it make you feel calm and at peace? Does it make you feel hungry? I think one of the simplest spells that I can share with you is to, light your candle and put out that water and go to bed without eating dinner. And whatever you dream of, that's probably what your ancestors want. when you dream about being in a restaurant and you're ordering something, or you're having this giant scone with clotted cream and jam, like that's probably what it is that they would like, at least in my experience. So that's another way. If you're interested in feeding them, they can take whatever it is that you're eating, or maybe they want something special. I don't know. Again, everybody is different and everybody's line is going to be different, but that's where actually doing the work comes into play. And that's where, allowing your own experience to individuate is enormously helpful.
I'm so happy. I'm so glad you actually did mention the dreams, because again, my experience was that receiving guidance, the dreams been for me the easiest and usually the most precise or the most detailed information. I was getting. I actually used it, as you said, for getting the information about my father's side, because I just knew a picture of my father. I knew nothing about him. I knew nothing about his bloodline. I have no idea. It was slightly disturbing because you don't know part of your gene pool where it's coming from. So I actually, for me, I noticed that occasionally all I have to do is set up intention and keep the intention in my mind as I'm falling asleep. So it's kind of, if I'm sliding to the sleep state, like the intention is like, I want to receive guidance about this and this. I want to receive guidance this and this and this and this. I really, really, really want to. And I like falling into the sleep. And actually, when I did that with my fatherline, I had a dream about 3 gypsy witches. And then I realized something I completely forgot, that my grandmother used to be joking about my father being gypsy and me being gypsy, and I was not happy about it at that point. But then I realized that, yeah, hold on, she actually used to say things like that, because I think she saw him for like 10 seconds somewhere. And then I saw the dream and I started connecting the dots. And then I asked about my mother's side. And then actually I saw some sort of like a temple, looks like a Jewish temple. And then again, I started to go deeper in it, and I realized that my great-great-grandmother was actually having the name Mim Khan, so she was Jewish. And somehow then I realized the name of Khan is the connected with the Jewish mystics. So like somehow I end up having the gypsy line and the Jewish mystics line together. And actually, dreams is great. I can't vote for that enough. Are you using dreams for just guidance, or are you using it for other things too?
Well, I think I don't really get to choose what my dreams are about. I dream and then I have to figure that shit out afterwards. So for me, it's a source of guidance. It's a source of inspiration. It is something which I will occasionally use to do divination off of, or which I will seek a professional diviner's help for. So that can also provide kind of like the sort of seeds of spirit contact as well, when you're verifying, okay, well, what was the important part of this dream? What was the message? Did you send it, or was it sent by someone else? So yeah, it's dream is just infinite. There's no limitations to what you might get out of it. But I think it's also hard to control, or at least for me, it's very hard to control.
Is that I've actually, but how I feel about dreams is like we have like every human have like a double life, the life of your conscious mind, which is when you're awake, and then the secret life of your unconscious mind that has its own life when you're asleep. So we have those two double lives, and again, duality merging together in one personality, and you have like two different minds. That's something that I kind of was working on myself in my system, and I was actually delegating most of my metaphysical and spiritual development to the unconscious mind, and then just like reaping the results from the conscious mind. I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed that if I actually delegate loads of it to the unconscious side, it goes faster, and I don't have
Mm.
to like lie down in the books and just like trying to squeeze elephant into the matchbox. I think you kind of know what I'm talking about. So
Yeah.
I've noticed that actually worked very well. It seems like I can just like my conscious mind can just vacation, and then just like let the unconscious mind, who somehow to me felt like better built for this actually type of work. So that's basically again something I was working on, and the dreams after that went like completely ballistic. Like my dreams are so filled with symbology that's ridiculous. I have like fogs in the castle and the paths and like all sorts of stuff are just like super like. But also I've noticed like once you start to do spiritual work like this, once you start to pay attention to the dreams are changing. They're like, oh, so
Mm.
you're paying attention, okay, so now I'm going to talk, and it's like
Right.
shoveling you with the information. Did you have the same experience?
Yeah, I think that the more you pay attention to your dreams, definitely the more vivid they can become. I think also dreams tend to be very, very sensitive to changes that are happening in your body. So, for women who experience the monthly cycle, that's something that will often cause a dramatic shift in your dreams. And personally, I have a pretty devoted Pilates practice. I'm a huge fan of Pilates. I love it. I think that it's great for developing the will and for communing with the body, because it's such an inward art. There's a reason why there are no Pilates selfies. It's because it actually looks really dumb when you're doing it, but then so much of your focus is in your body at that moment and communing with that one muscle that's really got to work overtime. And that can unleash really, really intense dreams, as can, I think, any kind of physical practice, any kind of embodied practice. The relationship, I think, between the physical body and the dreaming body may even be stronger than the relationship between, say, the mental or the imaginal body and the dream body. But that's just kind of my theory, and your mileage may vary.
That's so great. Oh, this is something definitely to explore. Wow, I'm going to like have to note it down. I'm not really Pilates girl, but maybe I'll try yoga or something like that. That sounds actually quite so interesting. Um, Actually, I think our show is slightly coming to an end, but I also wanted to ask you, obviously, at the end of the show, like where people can find you, because I'm quite sure they want to, but also like, is there something that some sort of like a direction with your practice you would like to explore that you're now thinking about? Wow, I really would like to get myself into this. Like, what is it? Your current directions, wishes, and wants in your magical practice?
Well, I feel like my plate is already a little bit over full at the moment in terms of my spiritual practice. If anything, I think my focus right now is going deeper with my ancestral work, and with exploring particularly Italian necromantic practices, like the cult at the Fontanelle Cemetery, or the cult of the Decolati, or the Holy Souls in Purgatory in Sicily. So I am hoping to continue deepening that practice and maybe even write a book about it someday. And if people are interested in keeping in touch with me, I would say the best way to do so, if you're interested in hearing more about herbalism and particularly herbs for divination, check out roadsideomens.vhx.com. And if you are interested more in Italian source material, translations of prayers and songs, and short articles written about Italian folk magic and Italian devotions to the saints and to the various forms of the Madonna, you can find me at paeseombra@wordpress.com.
Hey, that's true. Romans, like necromancy in Italy, go all the way to Romans, doesn't it?
And back further.
And back further to our Etrurians, right? It's just like
Yeah.
we are just entering that land, you just naturally become a necromancer. True. That's such an interesting topic. So great that you're writing about it again. I haven't seen that many people writing about this particular topic, so it's great to have somebody who can bring that to the melting pot of a magical community. I completely understand that you played being overstuffed. Feel the same way with magical practices. Is occasional like a candy shop. Just feel like occasionally I just want to open my mouth and stuff anything in it at the same time. So it's like no, stop eating one before you start another.
Yep. Yeah, I know that feeling.
And then it's like then I'm trying to, but then they come with a new book about necromancy or stuff like that. I'm like, okay. So thank you so much. I'm so happy to have you
Thank
here
you for having
today.
me.
I'm really hoping that people are now sitting in hoping if you'd love obviously googling your website already. Again, the links will be somewhere around. For the listeners on the YouTube or on the radio, I would like to also mention like you can see this show on the Monday. Can't forgot the date, but Monday I think 16th of July, something like that. 14th of July on the Pulse Talk Radio. It's going to be uploaded on the Mixcloud later on. You can see all the links to the archive of this show either on YouTube or on Facebook based Spiritual Alchemy Show, when there's a link to the archive on the Mixcloud, and the links will be somewhere around. So please check them out. As I said during the show, don't eat any herbs without consulting a professional first. If you don't want to end up pregnant, that should scare you off enough to not to do that. So in many cases. So again, thank you, Mallorie, so much for being here. I'm planning to get more girls on this show, so it's going to be a bit like a Spice Girls girl power for a few weeks to come, which I think is great thing. I do want to challenge the stereotypes about how magicians of which is supposed to look like. It's not always a tough man in his mid-30s with a beard wearing a hoodie. Occasionally it is, but not always. So you can see it's also a pretty girl in a flower dress. And so let's challenge that stereotypes, how magicians look like. And I will see all of you at some point soon in any of my shows. So bye.
Bye.